Hello, this is Mike Cardis from Organization Development by Mike Cardis. And today I want to share with you how you can identify what we call weak signals or early indicators that a person who's in a role inside your workplace, a manager, an employee, more importantly, a manager, may be too small or not able to handle the competency or the complexity of the role. So before I begin, I want to share a short story. A couple of years ago, I was working with a mid-sized to small business. They brought in around $6 million to $7 million in sales per year. They had a good company, good process, good structures, a good CEO, a rather strong leadership team, and they lost their sales director. They recruited a new sales director from the outside, and this director came into the organization. He interviewed very well. He seemed pretty competent in the role. He had good experience and good background. Yet as he started, the CEO quickly saw indicators that things were wrong. Number one was the CEO saw that this sales manager was excluding the CEO from the sales meetings. The sales team was talking to the CEO, telling him that he's seeing issues, but they weren't too sure about it. And eventually caused a lot of damage to the organization. So in the 1 year that they hired the new sales director, sales went from around 7 million to 4 million. Once that happened, it triggered the CEO to terminate the old sales manager. And then we talked about this. And I shared with him the same slides and a different content that I'm going to share with you. And the CEO said, shit. I saw these things early on. I knew these things were going on. I should have moved sooner. It took that organization about 3 years to go from 4 million back to 7 million. So the impact that a negative employee or the impact of a bad manager in your organization is damaging. It constricts everything and slows your whole company down. More importantly, if you are a manager and you have staff who are not able to get the work done, they're slightly incompetent or they're too small for the role, it also slows your work down and everything constricts. So I'm going to walk into some early indicators or weak signals, we call them. We call them weak signals because there are things that you can recognize early on that may help you begin to say, something is not right here. Now I'm going to add that not all of these happen in sequence, and they may happen in different patterns, but the things you can start looking out for to say, how can I tell if someone is not fit or is too small for the existing role I have them in? So the first part is the manager or the person complains about staff or team members. They start openly saying things like, these folks can't get work done, they're lazy, they're stupid. There's an obvious complaint happening. Now again, be thoughtful. Some of this complaining may be just because you were unaware of the team. And there are issues here. But if you find excessive complaints and you knew that people were good before this and you know it was a good team, be careful about that. Another area is the manager actively pushes out competent people. Now we found through the research that I did inside some government organizations and large manufacturing firms, that may look at the individual's ability to handle complexity inside a role, that you will tend to, by default, intuitively, bring in people who have less ability or less complexity than you to handle the role. So it constricts everything. So if I am too small for the learning and development role, and you hire me, and there are people who are more competent or more skilled than me, they can handle the work at a different level, there's a good chance I may push them out. And what I'll tell you is, these folks are not good enough for the role. I need different people. And as competent folks get pushed out, start being worried about that. If you see that happening, that's an early signal or a weak indicator. People actively seek transfers from the division. This is that rats jumping ship scenario, right? So suddenly you had a stable team, a good division. Think about that company I shared in the beginning where they had about 7 million in sales. Once a new sales director came in, some of the sales folks who have been there for, 15, 18 years, suddenly wanted to go to customer service. And when the CEO asked them about that, They just said they no longer felt comfortable inside the work. So once competent people or a mass of people start to leave the division, that's also an indicator that the person in that role or in that division may not be competent to get the work done or maybe lacking in the complexity. The manager starts to hire people that also lack proper capability for the roles. So this is when, if you're a manager once removed and you're sitting in the interviews or you read the resumes and you kind of say, this person, I'm not too sure they're qualified to get the work done. Are you sure they can do it? And normally or generally what the manager will say to you is, they can do it under me, just give me a chance. So what you're seeing now is another indicator here is that competency of the entire department is slowing down. Because now I want to bring in folks who are less competent than me because I'm scared. I know the work's already over my head. I want to appear good inside this role. So folks who threaten me organizationally or competently or intellectually, I may choose to push out. And then I'll hire in less competent people. I'll hire in less competent people because I can control them and I can manage them effectively. The manager starts to set excessively over-controlling and is micromanaging. We've all been experienced by this. Now, sometimes micromanaging is because the team is in disaster or in chaos and things have to be straightened out. But again, when people start getting micromanaged, that means that in some ways that they have a larger capacity to get the work done and they're feeling constrained. That's also an indicator that the manager or the person in that current role may not be big enough to handle the role. The manager fails to set adequately broad context for people to work. This aligns with the micromanaging. As a manager or director of the department, you set relatively broad goals. Here's the constraints. Here's the enabling constraints. These things support creativity, operations, synergy, development of new products. Here's the governing constraints, budget, number of people. You can't cross these lines. But essentially, inside your department or inside the organization, the manager sets the broad constraints and says, hey, as long as you stay inside these roles, work can get done. If the constraints become too small or they aren't broad enough, that's micromanaging, and that makes folks leave the department. Additionally, what that does is it constrains growth or constrains capacity inside that department or inside the individuals working with that person. Crushes you. The manager sets increasingly constraining policies and regulations in order to gain control. This one is, again, a quick indicator we see fast, is a noticeable deterioration of leadership qualities compared with effectiveness in previous roles. So let's say, for example, you choose to take a frontline staff, whether it be a direct service professional, a manufacturing person, a product designer who's on the front line, and promote them to a management role, or you move them to a different department and they have more work, higher OKRs or key result areas or other expectations. And in the earlier role, they were pretty easygoing. They showed good leadership. They had good communication. They had a nice, solid baseline management skills. And now in the new department, you're seeing this deteriorate, or they're having a hard time getting the work done. That means that they're feeling internal stress and they can't keep up with the work. Now with this piece, like many of these, you may want to give them some time, offer some coaching. But again, if it continues to happen, pick up on the signal early and act on it. This might mean the person is too small for the role. Manager's personality has noticeably changed. We saw this with a team I mentioned earlier, when they brought the new sales director in. In the interviews, and some of the folks knew the new sales director, he was a generally happy, gregarious, sort of easygoing person. Not too stressed. Yet about 3 months into work, we noticed lateness. We noticed aggressive and yelling behavior. We noticed that he wasn't shaving as much. So we were seeing clues that things were having a hard time. And his personality changed. Those things happen when you're under stress. The stress causes a shift in behavior. It also brings out more of those extreme behaviors. So if the person, for example, I'm working with a small company right now, and the CEO is under pressure, and the CEO is known to hide in his office and to sort of go underground when pressure increases. And right now, with the pressure increasing from COVID and shifts in funding streams and customer needs, he's spending more time in his office. So we're seeing personality changes because the pressure is increasing. So now you have to talk to the person and say, hey, we're noticing these things. I'm worried about this. But also, if you're watching the person to determine, is this going to hurt my organization? It's an early indicator or a signal, a weak signal of the things may be an issue. This one thing to be thoughtful about is the most frightening thing about having a manager that is too small is it creates underperformance and disengagement and gradual reductions in the level of competency of the team. This doesn't happen right away. It's a slow grind, which is why we call them weak signals. Weak signals are early indicators that things may not be wrong, that you have to begin to create ways to identify and investigate patterns to figure out, is this just a one-off or is there a pattern happening? Is the current employee just having a bad day, or are we seeing noticeable behavior changes long-term? Is it a repeating pattern? And also inside patterns, you want to find opposites so you don't become too biased in your pattern recognition. But ultimately what happens is the long-term disaster happens. And like the earlier story I shared, they went from 7 million to around 4 million. Crushed them. They laid people off, they lost sales. It took them 3 to 4 years to get back to their 7 million numbers. And so the impact of a bad manager will last 2 to 3 years, or the impact of a bad employee in your company will last 3 to 6 months, a year to 2 years. So being thoughtful about this is an important piece. So this is a slide, and I'll put this in a blog post that walks through how we can begin to see if the manager is too small in competence versus is big enough in competence. And there's some pretty basic things that show, but it aligns with the 9 indicators I showed before earlier to see if the person is big enough for their work. And here's just an image that kind of goes through all the issues. Now, again, like I said, these are not linear or sequential. You may have one of these happening at a time and others happening at a time. I just wanted to share with you indicators or weak signals that may show you that the person in the role, or maybe even you in the role, are not fully able or are having a challenging time at the complexity and the challenges of the work itself. So again, I'm Mike Cardis. Thank you for your time. And overall, what you can begin to do is, if you're seeing these signals, is to act on them early. You can develop coaching programs, training programs, and support programs, or if need be, you can demote, deselect, or terminate that person. Because if you choose to keep a person who you know is too small in complexity or cannot handle the level of work, then you're also accepting to take all your work and slow things down. And that may be something you want to do. Maybe you want the person to grow long-term with the organization. That's fair. Prepare for that though. And then if you hire or bring somebody in who is too small in complexity and you know can't get the work done, you have to also accept it'll take longer to get the work done. It'll happen slower. Overall, today I just wanted to share with you those 9 indicators. They're helpful to think about and to discuss. Again, I'm Mike Cardis from Organization Development by Mike Cardis. Have a good day.